Well, I was finally able to watch Kubi. I have been waiting quite a while to watch this film as it was one of my most anticipated films of 2023, but sadly I had no way of watching it in theaters near me. For the most part it was just released in Japan, although if I'm not mistaken I do believe it found its way into some international theaters. Regardless, those theaters were not near me and I was stuck waiting. Well, here we are now in the late summer / early fall of 2024, and some brave soul out there has uploaded the entire movie onto YouTube with subtitles. Now, is this sort of thing right to do? No, of course not. But until there is an actual legitimate way out there to stream the film, this is what we have to work with. And I am incredibly thankful that I can at least watch it now. I will leave the link down below to where you can watch Kubi here on YouTube as well. Just remember, it could get taken down at literally any moment, so keep that in mind if you are planning to check it out. With that said, let's get into it. So, how is Kubi? Or perhaps we should first answer, what is Kubi? Well, if you missed the trailers for the film or have not seen Bushido Blue's review of it, which I will link down below, Kubi is a new samurai film from Japanese comedian and actor Takeshi Kitano. Kitano, or as he is also known, Beat Takeshi, is in tons of stuff. He is an icon in Japan, from films to TV shows to even an incredibly bizarre video game that you need to check out. Like, seriously, I will leave a link down below to another great video on that too. But for most of us outside of Japan, one of the things we may actually know him best from would be Takeshi's Castle, or as many of us know it, MXC. Kubi, which translates to neck, was actually first a book which Kitano wrote. Now here though, he has turned into a full film, which of course he also directed and starred in. Its story follows the events leading up to the infamous Honnoji Incident and subsequent Battle of Yamazaki in 1582. And centers itself around two significant figures, that of Akechi Mitsuhide, played by Hidetoshi Nishijima, and Hashiba Hideyoshi, played by Kitano himself. It's here we experience all sorts of bloodshed, scheming, political intrigue, and many other shenanigans. This is a wild movie. It is completely a comedy, but you may not know that at first because it does start out with a bit more of a serious tone. In fact, the trailers didn't really portray it too much as a comedy either. And honestly, for the first half of the film, it was a bit more slow and serious. And for me, it wasn't until the second half where things really started to pick up and delivered some moments that really had me laughing quite hard. I loved how this film was able to take real history, or at least popular stories of things from the Sengoku period, and turn them into hilarious situations. And I have to say, it is hard to write this review because I want to touch on so many of these jokes, but I also don't want to spoil them either if you haven't seen it. Most of the fun and comedy is having the joke play out in front of you naturally, and I don't want to ruin a bunch of the jokes here by explaining them beforehand. So what I'll try to do here for this review is instead stick to just the aspects of real history that are shown in the film and not anything deeper about the story or characters beyond just surface level stuff. No major spoilers for this one here. Just know that if you are someone who has studied the history, this film becomes incredibly more rewarding as you will understand all of these jokes. If you don't understand the history, much of the humor may sadly be lost on you. So, let's get into that history. Is Kubi historically accurate? No, but it generally follows the flow of real events with plenty of liberties taken along the way. It's obviously not trying to play itself off as some super accurate film depicting events as close to reality as they were, which is where you can separate this film from a film like Sekigahara. Now, don't get me wrong, I do really like the Sekigahara film for what it is, but its inaccuracies are a bit tedious when the film itself is trying to take itself so seriously. Here, all these silly details don't detract from the experience, and instead are what help to add to the humor. The first major wacky element we are exposed to is how the film portrays Oda Nobunaga. Now, we have seen Nobunaga portrayed as unorthodox, immature, psychotic, or even villainous in plenty of other films and games, but Kubi takes it to a complete new level. Nobunaga in Kubi is absolutely an insufferable person. He is awful, the worst boss you can ever imagine working for. He verbally and physically abuses the lords under him and puts them through all sorts of forms of hellish torment, all for his own sadistic amusement. It's not surprising that anyone would want to betray him. Was Nobunaga really this deplorable? No, probably not. He was likely no worse than any other samurai leader at the time, and that even goes for the atrocities he committed, like his infamous attack on Mount Hiei in 1571. But if you did watch my recent video discussing the life of Akechi Mitsuhide, you know that there were actually a couple of significant figures who betrayed Nobunaga years before he did. So perhaps there is some merit to the stories of him being someone difficult to serve in one way or another. These are the stories that paint him in a bit more of a cruel light, especially with how it comes to how he treated his underlings. However, it should be noted that I don't believe anything about these tales have been fully confirmed, and many of them likely originated later during the Edo period. So this depiction of Nobunaga here in Kubi really has taken the pop culture route with their interpretation of him, which is totally fine given the nature of the film. If I did have one gripe, it would be that in the film he doesn't come off as really someone who seems competent by any regard. I don't see this Nobunaga as being able to lead or inspire anyone, so it's not really believable that he would ever have gotten to where he is at this point in time when the film takes place. Regardless though, beneath him we have our array of his greatest commanders, many of the big names of the period, most prominent among them in this story being Hashiba Hideyoshi, Akechi Mitsuhide, and Tokugawa Ieyasu. Without going into too much detail, everyone here is kind of scheming for power in their own way. While some just want to appease Nobunaga to further their own position, others know that his downfall is somewhat inevitable. And really the only person who can see past this and is trying to arrange all the pieces so that they fall in the right place for him to take over in the aftermath is Hideyoshi. He's the biggest schemer of the story, and what's hilarious is how Kitano presents him. Kitano is in his mid-70s, and thus Hideyoshi here looks quite a bit older than he would. So does the actor playing Ieyasu, which is funny that both Hideyoshi and Ieyasu look so much older than Nobunaga, who in reality was older than both of them. Kitano plays Hideyoshi a bit like a fish out of water. Hideyoshi was not born a samurai, and this point is often brought up throughout the film in sometimes very funny ways. Which is also why the supporting cast is so key here. In the film, Hideyoshi is always accompanied by two faithful advisors, Hashiba Hidenaga and Kurora Kanbei, who, if you noticed, is also played by Asano Tadanobu, which you may recognize as Yabushige from Shogun. These two play off of Hideyoshi quite well as their minds come together to hatch their plot. And while there is certainly plenty of silly things that happen along the way, what adds to this film being such a wild experience and really unlike any other samurai film I've seen before is how it also portrays its setting. This was obviously a very violent time where there was often little regard for human life, and the film goes 150% into this concept as it shows literally everyone is trying to kill one another. Best friends, loved ones, family, you name it. And it doesn't shy away from the gore either, because man, this film is bloody. And while I do appreciate them showing this grittier side of samurai warfare, with the level of violence and other details like head-taking and looting, we'll get back to head-taking later, but for the battles, I just wish they would have portrayed them a little better. Basically, there was a lot of katana being used in the film, way more than there would have been used at the time. Rather, you should be seeing more yari spears being used here for the troops engaging in melee. But honestly, I'm not going to complain about that too much given how the movie is so wacky as it is. I mean, there is even a scene where two people fighting leap 50 feet in the air like it is some sort of anime battle. This is just so random that I have to imagine it was done as a joke, but it caught me so off guard just because of how unexpected it was. At no other point in the movie does anyone do anything so crazy. There is also a lot of ninja stuff in the movie. As you may already know, I'm not the biggest fan of that either. But I am willing to cut it a bit more slack here given the tone of the film. And to be honest, I do feel that for the most part, what they showed regarding any ninja or shinobi elements actually made good sense for the story and didn't often come off as putting ninja in for the sake of putting ninja in like other films have done. But besides these details, another main element shown throughout the story, and one which is woven deep into the central plot, is that of male-male samurai relationships. These were very real things that we have touched on before. Many samurai engaged in these types of close, intimate relationships with other samurai, usually more often with their pages or kosho. There are famous stories of this type of relationship between that of Oda Nobunaga and Mori Ranmaru, which, yes, is very much depicted here in the movie. I've seen some people say that the samurai-on-samurai romance is at the forefront of the film, and while I don't totally agree with that, it is quite a prominent detail shown, which once again is a bit more unique because it is something that we don't often see depicted in most forms of media involving samurai, so it's obviously a conscious choice by Kitano. And as long as we are talking about things that Kitano wanted to show here, we also get another character who is quite fascinating, someone who has been really quite famous recently, well, after when the film came out. Because yes, one of the prominent characters in many of Nobunaga's scenes is that of Yasuke. Yasuke is here in full force, and I think the film showcases him brilliantly. Nobunaga uses Yasuke as a powerful and intimidating bodyguard. I don't think the film ever addresses the controversy surrounding the was he a samurai or not question, but it does show differences in Yasuke's mindset, specifically during the Honnoji Incident, in what turns out to be a pretty shocking moment between Nobunaga and Yasuke. Once again, I'm not going to say what happens here, but I do love how it shows even though Nobunaga had elevated Yasuke's status quite a bit, Yasuke's own mindset and conduct as a warrior differs greatly to that of a typical samurai. And it's because of Yasuke's actions here that another significant historical detail presents itself in the story. Which, by the way, part of what Yasuke does here is also a local legend surrounding the Honnoji Incident. So it's just another funny way that Kitano wove in details like this. But anyway, things all come together quite well and pave the way to the showdown at Yamazaki between Hideyoshi and Mitsuhide. Now, I didn't find the battle here to be anything crazy. It's not an epic or dramatic, action-packed spectacle. What matters is how it ends. We know from real history, Mitsuhide tried to flee the battlefield after his forces started to collapse. What we don't know for sure is when or where he was killed. In fact, some stories even say he survived. But there is one story that says that Mitsuhide's head may have actually been taken and presented to Hideyoshi, but that it was in such rough shape that it was difficult to truly tell if it was him or not. What's awesome is that Kitano also decided to weave this silly little side story into the film in such a funny but also interesting way. Head-taking itself is a pretty common reoccurring theme throughout the entire film. I mean, the film is called Kubi, meaning neck, obviously the place where a sword cuts to remove a samurai's head. It is referenced a lot, and there is a lot of focus given to the importance of taking heads during battle, which, as we know historically, was an incredibly important element of samurai warfare. Now, there is a side character in the film named Mosuke. He is a peasant and really quite a jerk, but he is someone enamored with the story of Hideyoshi, who himself was also born a commoner but rose through the ranks to become a great samurai general. Mosuke wants to achieve this same meteoric rise, so he is constantly trying to take the heads of fallen warriors, no matter who they were or when they died, so that he can present them and earn greater status. So it's quite obvious from very early on who is going to be the one to get Mitsuhide's head. However, as we find out, life isn't fair in the Sengoku era. In fact, life isn't really fair most times. And Mosuke's great quest is never going to ever pan out like he would have hoped. Instead, what we are left with is the great schemer, Hashiba Hideyoshi, fresh off of his great victory and poised to continue his own path now towards unifying the land, with really little regard to those beneath him or perhaps even around him. A man born a peasant who can't read and has little care for much of the intricacies of samurai culture. Truly just a selfish dude playing off of others to further his own status. Kubi.
What a picture. What a picture.
Good picture.
There is not a ton more I can get into without diving too deep into spoilers, so I think now is a good time to tell you simply what I would rate the film. I think, when all is said and done, I would give Kubi 3 stars out of 4. Kubi is great at taking historical details and turning them into hilarious moments, even if they do tend to get a bit outlandish at times with certain things. Its plot is also a bit clunky, though still serviceable. Like I said, I don't think things really started to get rolling until the second half of the film. Even then, there might be some moments that will have you scratching your head. What truly helps hold everything together is really its brilliant cast of unique characters, who each shine in their own way. If the characters didn't work so well, none of the jokes would land as hard. And if that didn't happen, I don't think the film would be anything memorable. And I know we really didn't talk much about it here, but its cinematography, editing, and music are all pretty good too. I was originally debating just giving it half a star for this because I didn't feel it was anything too spectacular. But upon editing this review, I was able to more thoroughly examine some of these details and felt that overall it was worth a full star. But really, if you can't already tell, I did have a good time watching Kubi, and I am very happy with how it turned out. It does fall a bit into that category much like Kagemusha, where you do need to have a certain level of understanding with the history to truly get the most out of what is going on. But besides that, it really is quite unique. I actually hope that Kitano comes back to do more historical comedies like this. In fact, it would be cool to even see him reprise this iconic role as Hideyoshi, because there is still a lot more to his story that would be cool to cover. There are just so many more moments from Hideyoshi's life that I would love to see portrayed with Kitano's version of the figure. So I think it's pretty clear that I too strongly recommend checking out Kubi. Just keep in mind that it is a pretty violent film. It is also a bit gratuitous at times, and it can be a bit convoluted, but it's also a hilarious exploration of the period. With that said, are you planning on watching Kubi? If you already have, let me know what you think about it in the comments below. I would love to hear what your thoughts are. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell if you enjoyed this video and found it to be most interesting.